What's up, everybody? My name is Blaine Warren, and today I'm going to be talking about my favorite coffee, which is the red and yellow blend from Golden Bush Coffee. So, over the course of many centuries, coffee has developed from an exclusive drink meant for only the highest members of society to one of the most beloved and often consumed drinks on the entire planet. The rise of coffee farms and shops can be seen worldwide, where it feels like you can't even turn a corner and not see a coffee shop. However, it's not only coffee as a business that's developed, but the flavor profile as well. Hundreds of years ago, coffee was still in its primitive stages. People would just make coffee from the beans, maybe add some natural sweeteners like milk, sugar, honey, call it a day. However, as modern brewing practices came to be, people started to brew their own coffee in a way that allowed them to add their own complementary notes, elevating their coffee to a level not seen and just giving it that extra oomph. One of these special types of coffees is the red and yellow blend from Golden Bush Coffee. This coffee is special because of its present tasting notes of exotic fruits like mango, banana, and strawberry. This makes it a lot more enjoyable than just a cup of regular black coffee. It gives it like a tea flavor almost. It's not even acidic. Its dark chocolate notes give it a nice body of flavor as well. And the coolest part is it's heavily inspired by its Colombian origins. it's it's opened up my eyes to what a coffee can be like. It's so much more different than anything I had. And since it was like one of the first coffees that we've had during our tastings, I was like, wow, blew my mind almost. Usually, I would put a little coffee or a little milk in my coffee to try and null the acidity down. But honestly, adding anything isn't really necessary with the red and yellow blend. It's just enjoyable on its own. You can just drink it straight up black and you can still taste the notes, and it's just a great all-around awesome cup of coffee. But so, as I said, this blend is heavily inspired by its origins from Colombia. The beans are from Colombia, specifically Tolima. That's where its origins are from. And so by examining the roots of the coffee, we can determine how the history of Colombia and the coffee trade, the supply chain of Colombian coffee, and the workplace ethics of coffee farms play a factor into the coffee's identity. When it comes to the planting, production, and supply chain of coffee beans, Colombia is one of the world's largest outputs for the crop. However, the history of how Colombia became such a dominant player in the coffee production industry has its roots in some of the darker parts of history. In the 17th century, it is believed that Jesuit priests brought the crop to the country while on a trip attempting to convert the local population to Christianity. In 1835, the first shipment of Colombian coffee arrived in the US due to the labor of enslaved people working on the farms. Over the course of the next 25 years, coffee beans became the most common crop exported out of Colombia. In modern times, that hasn't changed. Colombia is still a powerhouse in the coffee distribution world. However, thanks to the establishment of the National Federation of Coffee Growers of Colombia in 1927, it allowed for a creation of an effective workers' union and the also helped by the country's Department of Agriculture, it allowed for advancements in the cultivation systems and spatial patterns in the coffee fields, which allowed for a higher quality of the crop and the protection of their workers, their rights, and their families. Thanks to the work of many people overseas, American culture has been rooted in the consumption of coffee for hundreds of years. From being used in war adverts to begin coffee rationing, such as the one shown above, it is edited, but it does take a portion of a coffee ad used from the era of the World Wars to becoming the cornerstone of modern office culture. Various elements of the American lifestyle have been centered around the consumption of coffee. It has become a staple in sleepless nights, whether it be for college students cramming for an exam or even for campaigners for political parties. People used it as a resource to help keep them working for longer periods of time. Another important effect on coffee in American culture and history was the rise of the modern coffee house. In the early 1900s, coffee houses were seen as a place where only a select few would gather, such as immigrants, to discuss whatever was going on in their lives. This can be seen in the 1900s with Italian immigrants starting what we now know as a coffee house. However, as coffee became more of a phenomenon in the decades after, places like Starbucks began to pop up in more towns across America. At this point, the view shifted from coffee houses being a place where only a few could gather to a place where all were welcome to come and stay however long they wanted. In a way, this has led to the gentrification of the modern day coffee house. One part of the stereotype is the exotic flavors that these companies try to blend in to give their roast different notes, with some being far more successful than others. So I just wanted to add at the bottom this little meme. I feel like it's a great representation of what people see in coffee houses now, such as the starter pack. So you got everything here that you would typically see or what you would expect to see in a modern day coffee house. So I thought that was just a pretty funny like adding to the stereotype. As far as supply chain issues are concerned, Colombia is home to the Green Coffee Company, which has access to over 12.5 million coffee plants and is Colombia's largest coffee producer. Some very interesting features about the Green Coffee Company, also known as the GCC, is that they own their entire supply chain, roasting, milling, byproduct, and harvesting processes, and then go directly to consumers into mass market supermarkets. And that is taken from their CEO, Boris Warner Garces. They are also looking at expanding their supply chain, with them planning to make huge advancements, such as hiring sales reps and establishing a proper delivery structure to make sure their coffee gets to all the possible supermarkets in the US and even looking to expand into parts of Europe. Another interesting feature about the GCC is that they're using environmentally conscious methods in order to produce their coffee. For example, they have repurposed coffee waste in order to produce ethanol and cascafa flour for their other products. Funnily enough, they're not just a coffee company. It's interesting to see the measures certain companies take in order to take a greener approach to their methods. One final note that I'd like to add about the GCC is how they treat their workers. Their CEO promised that all of their workers are fully employed with proper benefits like health insurance and work 5-day, 40-hour weeks instead of 7 days a week like other growers in the area. Keeping all this in mind, I think that the GCC is a coffee company that produces ethically sourced coffee. They have various measures in place that prove that their priorities are keeping the environment and their workers safe and healthy. Plus, with all the coffee crops they own and maintain, it shows that this large-scale operation is not one made to take advantage of the land and the native people, but one to hopefully maintain and possibly even improve. I also think it is important to drink coffee from brands and operations that take part in ethically sourcing their product. By giving them business, it's helping them to maintain their own operation and possibly make improvements for both the operation and the employees, creating a positive loop that impacts everyone involved. So, for diversity in the Colombian coffee workforce, it's an ever-present issue, but it is improving. Equal opportunities are still challenging for women to come by, and many still face issues from men who think that women should not be present in their industry. In fact, the FNC, which stands for the Colombian Coffee Growers Federation, launched a policy that is all about gender equity and giving women equal opportunities in December of 2021. This policy mentions that some startling figures that echo issues faced by women in the industry. This includes women receiving a whopping 34.5% less income for activities in rural areas, the unemployment rate for rural women being 14.8% versus 5.8% for rural men, and 30% of all coffee growers in Colombia being women. Based on these figures, women are put into a lower social class due to their earnings being effectively slashed, either being forced to rely on a man to help them live or living below par standards due to their lower wages. It also affects safety as well, as women are often targets of violence in the industry. So for some, it can be a fear to just show up for work, even before worrying about their lessened wages. However, thanks to the work of the FNC, these conditions are being improved for women to receive equal opportunities as their male co-workers and for the work conditions to be much safer compared to previously. Unfortunately, factors such as these are commonplace in all across the world in various degrees. However, it's nice to see that the coffee industry is attempting to settle the differences between the gender opportunities. However, these factors won't really influence the production all that much aside from workplace improvement, as both men and women can hopefully work side by side and receive equal opportunities in Colombia. As mentioned before, the GCC makes it clear that all their workers are given full payment opportunities with benefits, and with the FNC working to make equality happen across all of Colombia, it's safe to say that conditions are working on being improved or at an ethically manageable point already. Regarding environmental ethics, companies such as the GCC are taking environmentally friendly precautions through how they set their operation and the methods they use in order to reuse instead of waste their resources. This seems to echo the ethical idea of anthropocentrism. According to J. Baird Callicott, contributor to the academic journal Daedalus, anthropocentrism is the idea that a single individual's action with regard to the environment may have an impact on all human beings. If the farmers decide to use pesticide or another harmful chemical on the crops, anyone who buys the coffee, the people using it, and so many more are affected by the use of chemicals. Similarly, I also feel that the coffee respects the culture of the region where it came from, as it explicitly states that the beans are from and takes pride in the fact that the beans are Colombia, especially with the red and yellow. According to Thomas H. Johnson, contributor to the academic journal Anthropological Quarterly, he defines cultural relativism as the attitude of objectivity toward another culture. I feel that this is a perfect ethical outlook on the culture aspect of this type of coffee. It takes pride in being from Colombia, and wants everyone to know that this blend of coffee is Colombian to the core, with the notes of exotic fruit even being large factors in its identity. Finally, when it comes to corporations caring about the community's well-being, this can tie back into the efforts the GCC are incorporating in their production. If they didn't care about the community's well-being, why would they try to preserve the surrounding environment and make efforts to keep everyone safe and healthy? Even if it's not as widespread throughout all of Colombia, the largest coffee production in the country is making efforts to keep the people and their communities healthy, while also making efforts to not pollute our environment with their work, making it so that they leave a meaningful impact while also keeping up with the ever-increasing demand with coffee not only in America, but worldwide. Being said, this sounds very similar to an ethical outlook known as Kantian ethics. According to the textbook Ethics for A-Level, they cite philosopher Immanuel Kant as saying, "So act that you use humanity in your own person as well as in the person of any other, always at the same time as an end, never merely as a means." This ties in well with the idea of corporate responsibility, as it seems the GCC are treating their employees as people with needs and wish to provide them with an equal and decent living opportunity instead of seeing them as means to an end and taking advantage of their labor. And here are my works cited. Thank you all